Yeah.
All right. What's going on, Macro Perspective peeps? This is going to be a great roundtable of three health coaches being in the fitness, nutrition, health coaching world. We've got a great guest today. I first met Andrew Garritson about 3 to 4 years ago at a nutrition coaching kind of convention, seminar, summit, whatever it is, NCI about 3, 4 years ago. I was
It's
part of the
crazy.
team and went through his courses that they had, and it was great learning from him about like nutrition coaching, and then just kind of been following his stuff. And Andrew, I didn't know, like looking at your socials, like first off, military. So thank you for your service, man.
I
Were you a
appreciate it.
Marine?
Yeah. Yep.
My
Spent a
brother's a
couple
Marine,
years.
so appreciate that.
Good man.
So, much love, but we're all here because of the landscape, and what you're doing too is delivering an offer for health coaches, nutrition fitness coaches to kind of get education and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, intro yourself a little bit. How'd you get into the fitness, the nutrition, the coaching world? What passions lie? And I feel like you've done so much too. I think are you getting like a master's or even like a higher degree in all this stuff too?
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, I was going to write a book called 26 and Still No Clue. And I think if I were to write and title my life, it would be 36 and Still No Clue. And it's just funny to think about the evolution of the years, but I guess, it began when I was the fastest sperm cell. And I would like to we'll skip a couple years, but
About 9 months at
yeah,
least.
forward, 2 years. And then I was no, I'm kidding. But my background was I was a terrible student in high school. I was always an athlete and I had Olympic dreams in Taekwondo for a while until I did so poorly in 10th grade's honors algebra 2 class because I wanted to turn around and flirt with the pretty girls because I was so tired from training 8 hours a day. And I was always like naturally, somewhat intelligent. I just didn't have any academic work ethic. So because this was a hard class, I made like a 56. My mom whooped my ass and said, no more school first because she's the traditional tiger Korean mom, as well she should have pulled me out. So no Wheaties box for me, but it really helped me, understand that I had some disordered eating tendencies that I had to work through that started in like fifth grade. I was born in Korea, grew up in the States after like 8. And I remember this is one specific instance where my buddy at the time looked over at me and like basically called me fat and waterline. He was like, hey, nice titties is exactly what he said. I was like, oh my God. And so it kind of caused this whole spiral. My dad showed me a workout routine. I did the same workout routine for like 7 years, bro, religiously. It was like a back and biceps kind of thing. And then, I discovered Muscle and Fitness magazine. I was also training for the Olympics at the time. And so like all these things really started to converge and helped me understand that I was not meant for a desk job and that catapulted me into the Marine Corps and, going down the reconnaissance community. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how to look at this quite yet, but I've always been a little bit of an elitist and I'm not complacent where I'm like, okay, I have a degree. Let me just end there. Like, I'm like, no, let me get a doctorate. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm a Marine. No, like, let me go into the special forces component. And so these are just the things that are the through line of kind of the last 36 years of life for me and just kind of chasing the next things.
Yeah.
It's serendipitous now to kind of couch it all is that um, I've invested probably over $600,000 in my education between 3 degrees and like 80 different certifications. And I think that that's actually a really big crippling limitation in the way that I see people that are new personal trainers making more than I ever did in my 20s. And they have like a single certification and they're figuring it out. And so, how do we bridge the gap of, I think my life's purpose, which is to effectively raise the standards of a broken industry and rebuild the trust of consumers. And, that's kind of what brings me to having great conversations with, people like yourself, Seamus, and getting to put on these events and, meeting in random meeting rooms in a precision nutrition level 2 call where you're like, Andrew, is that you? And I'm like, oh, that's wild. So, I think that
Wait.
full
Take a
circle.
step back. You were in the L2 with
I've taken
us?
the L2 like 3 times. Every time they
Oh,
release a new one, I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Check it out. So this was the most recent one. And I actually just took it again like a couple
Dude, how many
months
times
ago.
you paying for this shit, bro?
I think 4 times by now.
God damn.
Actually. Yeah, because I mean, like, it's always interesting to see how they redo things. And so when they were doing that, it was post-COVID. They were like, hey, it's the new health coaching thing. And I think they really fucked their branding up, actually. I think they really made a bad mistake. They didn't market it well. And like the way that they kind of rolled it out, there was a lot left to be desired. So now it had been a couple of years since they'd done the health coaching thing. I was like, I wonder if they figured it out. And it's exactly the same thing. So I think that everyone in the
Who's
certification
doing
tree,
your certification reimbursements, bro? Because you're paying like thousands
nah,
of
bro.
dollars.
Yeah,
Self-funded.
yeah,
God,
yeah,
bro.
600K. Yeah, no, I got debt. No, like all that to say is keeping up and reinvesting with those things has allowed me to maintain my edge and like maintain a certain level of renown in the industry of like, I don't really care. I'm agnostic. I don't care what people believe. I just look at, is it effective? Is it not effective? And how can we make it better? And I
Yeah.
need to reinvest and go and scope what other people are doing and
Yeah.
constantly like poke around like the FDN one.
Doing your market research.
Yeah, and so it's you just can't ask people about that stuff though. You got to go
You gotta
and
be
do
in
it
it.
in
Gotta be
Devo.
in.
So yeah,
Hmm.
but
I
that's
mean,
pretty much it.
so you think that when did precision nutrition sell? Like,
Oh, 2020? I think it was around COVID because Berardi was at NCS or he's at Impact and Income. I think it's 2020, 2021, somewhere around there.
and that's
And
when like the sale happened. They kind of moved more into that like
Mhm.
big, like heavy market push versus maybe
Yeah.
more of the course based thing that you kind of felt like had a bigger draw for you.
Yeah. I think that they definitely had a big shift in terms of the directionality and they found a good gap. I will say, I think health coaching is definitely going to be the thing that subsumes a lot of the other current industries. I think personal training will always be a thing, but I think it'll be a lot smaller because of the quality issues that we're seeing. And I think that people, in the consumer space will start to look at that. But I think PN and the PE group, which I can't remember which one it was, but when they got bought, like they really, they pivoted away from I think some of the core DNA and just looking at some of the nutritional elements, just my experience of it. But it sounds like you guys have also been a part of it for a while. Like, what was your experience?
Well, I think I had my L1. Was it right as we bridged into COVID? Seamus, did we all take the L1 together? So like,
No, you
was it?
guys took the L1 on your own, but I took the L1 about maybe a year or two before because I did it on my own
Yeah.
at like a gym when we offered like nutrition coaching too.
Yeah.
So it
So
was
I had to have
probably
been.
around the same time, but not with the company.
Yeah, we did it as an organization. I think in 2020 because I remember being in our old office. So therefore, it was definitely more of like it was a way of like creating community bonds like virtually across all of our health coaches, right? And therefore, yes, it had to have been during that time. So I guess I didn't know PN pre like sales version of marketing heavy PN, which again, like when it comes to like selling and leads and like their advertising, they do like a fantastic job. So I mean, there's something to be said about that from that perspective because it's like it's always kind of top of mind. They're always kind of like in your inbox and saying like, hey, like don't miss out, and it kind of like
they made me
gives you that.
they made me pull out my credit card as soon as I called Marcus. I'm like, do we need to get this? Because it's this. We get it that Friday. Monday they roll around. They do the offer, but even better. And I'm like, should have just waited until Monday, Marcos.
Yeah.
Well, the offer will always kind of get better, I think, seemingly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like my experience, like it leads us into like the next thing that Seamus and I are going to here later this year. We're seeking out more in-person type of things, events, networking and exchanging of ideas in the flesh versus in a digital and remote capacity because it's just been the same thing for the last 5 years. And while it's a great thing to have conversations and do podcasts like this just for the sake of like you're across the country, we can't like all get together and coordinate. It's a harder thing to like have a group or a cohort of people that's 200 deep, or however many they have in there. And so I think it's like the way that I view education now versus like, Seamus spent, how many hours did you spend studying for the actual board cert, dude?
Dude, I was spending an hour a day, and then I was spending the weekends, and then and then this is you. You're like, I haven't gotten to it. Then the last 2 weeks, you spend like a few hours on the weekends, and then he hits a higher grade than me. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm like over here. Like, I've never been a person that can get study concepts. Like, I always have to do it 6 times. Like, I have to read the textbook before the lecture. I have to do the lecture, take notes at the lecture, record it, review my notes, take off my notes, read the book one more time, then explain it to someone. I'm like for one chapter, I need to do it 6 times for me to codify it into my mind.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've struggled with knowledge that's like really in depth, especially when I was getting my degree. Like it just takes a while. I was in the higher like kinesiology classes, like they were really great. I was like number 1 in class though, like for all of them. But it's just like I know that about myself. I'm like, what is it, Batman? Like I need prep time. Like I need prep time. I just do. I'm not a person that can show up cold. I can't.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's
But
completely
spewing
opposite.
but spewing facts and axiomatic truths are just like what my degree's in math. So it's like very basic and understanding is like, if you get the gist of the questions, if you understand, the mechanisms in the sense of like how the test breaks down and how to almost reverse engineer it, it ends up being like, you just have to be a good test taker, which that's kind of my one gripe with the board cert as it stands right now, is that like, while PN did have like kind of some extra things that actually got me thinking, because they're like, hey, you coach, it's evident you know what you're doing in a coaching perspective, but you didn't really hit all these benchmarks as we had it listed out in the rubric. So I appreciated the criticism and the feedback to like actually have to go work at something, because to go work at like getting good at a test, I'm like, this is just like everything else that like doesn't really help me. Right. So from PN's approach on the back end of that, after the class, like the transition from that level 2 into going to the board cert, they're a little kind of interim, like non-existent class, but kind of a class where you have hours you have to kind of do with coaching in addition to meet with mentors. I got more out of that 1 month than the entirety maybe of like the course, aside from like the actual, like you have to show up to the classes and you're in breakout sessions. So like the breakout sessions plus the testing of like skills in the health coaching vein were more appropriate to me, which is more of like the application side of things, which was more of NCI and Jason's thing from day one. And that's also where I started. That was with Jason and NCI, right? Like I was, nutrition coach, coaching macros, like group challenges, you name it, like the infancy stages of the business. And then it blossomed into, a whole different thing. Here we are like a decade later, right? So like I've always been more of like, who cares? Like the book stuff is great, but like, how do I coach it so I actually get the result for people?
Yeah. Yeah. That was a thing. And I think for me though, Andrew, I think I liked the PN was great, but I really think a lot of people struggled with their communication in that class. I think there was just some people in that class that just like Marcos and I would talk after. I'm like, I don't think they ran this. And I'm not trying to be mean to them, but it was just like, I don't know how you can call yourself a coach if these soft skills are just like not innate a little bit, like, or this adaptability be innate and like be able to adapt on the fly. Because what they were trying to teach, I feel like I codified that, and I think Marcos did a great job as well of being able to show up to coaching calls and it's just like, oh yeah, I don't got to solve anything. I don't got to solve no problems today. Even though we're in a clinical world and like they're paying us for these results, what I've realized is like the ownership's not on me. I'm just a guide on the side. And then like what's interesting is like once I changed that concept from PN, they're like, you just got to care a little bit less, dude. Honestly, I think all my client results like exploded. Like I felt like all my client results, the way they stayed accountable, the retention efforts were just like, oh, it's smooth now. I don't know what it was. I think the shift was I had to fix somebody as opposed to like, nah, you got this, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really highlights the idea that a coach-driven approach versus a client-centered approach is just they're two very different paradigms, and one is a lot more painful. And if you're in performance sports, it matters. But I think the context and the population we want to work with at the end of the day should cause us a little bit of pause. And I think that inherently there is this performance orientation when it comes to education in general of like, you have to do this with your clients to get results. And oftentimes they forget that there's a human being attached to the program that is going to dictate whether it gets done or not. And so influence becomes the quintessential linchpin that I think a lot of people oftentimes have no idea, exactly to your point. They're just not great communicators, and it's not something that they've ever had modeled for them, especially in post-COVID era where people are just glued to their phones and they have time to think about things that it's not off the cuff. And, it's just, we're kind of jacked up these days.
Yeah, no, 100%. That leads me to the question. I mean, we're talking about this course, but I want you launched something recently, and you guys are pretty excited. But tell us about your
Yeah,
change psychology. Tell us like what was like the
man.
iteration of this? Like what stemmed from like what were the problems you were seeing that we're kind of talking about right now? And you're like, where can I fill the gap? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple different dimensions to that question. One of which is, and I think Lifetime was one of the first brands and organizations that really helped me consider a three-dimensional stakeholder perspective. One of which is what's right for the brand and the company, what's right for the employee or the person delivering, and what's right for the consumer. And so we're always looking kind of like at the headshot concept and this weird little Venn diagram of what threads the needle in the middle. And when we understand, if we look around these days, a lot of certifications are getting increasingly expensive. They're thousands of dollars, and frankly, or they're a race to the bottom. And, ISSA, no shade on them, is constantly throwing a 99% off. And like, come on, guys, like that's at that point, just lower the price and call it what it is. But it's really just taking advantage of the influence strategies and tactics of, some of these getting a deal. So we just wanted to create some very clear this is for the consumer. This is supposed to be at a very cheap price point, which is $67 if you want access to the content in a subscription basis, or it's $99 if you wanted access to the certification route and actually get the piece of paper, get the slide decks, all the other stuff. And we wanted to make it cheap enough that people that were looking at considering becoming a coach would have access to the skills. And it includes all the courses that we will currently offer in the next year, which we do have 5 courses. We just launched our nutrition one, which is based upon a tool that is called the audit. And more or less, I mean, just transparently, we look for nutritional deficiencies and we coach people up on how to execute that, whether it's supplementation, whether it's, food recommendations. And, we use certain proprietary tech platforms to help us do that. So the information by and large is available everywhere. We just packaged it in a way that makes it a lot more systematic and helps people learn exactly what to dial in on and how to coach people around that process. So that's more or less how we've structured a lot of our courses and the framing of that we're still currently building, but they're all based around a specific tool or 3. And that allows a lot of time to build the the knowledge base around the tool set. And so it seems like it really helps focus versus like, here's this inventory, here's this one thing, and like, here's this random nondescript piece of information that now I have to figure out how to integrate into my own coaching system, which, by the way, as a new coach, you probably don't have one.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's really important to give people the tool, teach them how to use the tool, and then teach them the limitations of the tool, which, transparently we can't do in the course, because if we teach people limitations and they're learning the system, we open up so much complexity that it drowns people immediately. So like the idea is, how much of the curtain do you pull back before you tell people that there really isn't an answer? And I think that requires a certain level of sophisticated consumer to be able to handle that truth. And a lot of beat downs in life and probably frankly a little bit of just resentment against the certification industry in general, to be like, man, none of this shit works. Let me figure out my own stuff, which seems like it happens around year 5 for most coaches.
That is so funny. I mean, just quite frankly, like it really is that. I think, nutrition, fitness, like they go through these cycles, health goes through these cycles. And it's like seed oils were a thing back in the 90s. Now they're like back again. And it's like fats and then all these things. And it's like, it just gets funny and things just get recycled. But like, you're right. I think there's attrition in the fitness industry and then there's attrition, but to be really savvy in this world, like Marcos and I are like 10 plus years in this, you're 10 plus years in this. It's like, you either burn out early or you're in there long enough to actually realize like, oh, this is what works.
Yeah.
I think you're right though. Like you said, like framework is good until it isn't. Like what you're kind of saying, that's like the scaffolding, and like there's always kind of these like, but what if it's this other thing? And I think, like you said, you're like around year 5 where you just feel like you're at the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger curve and you're just like, I know fucking nothing right now. And it's like, nah, it's just that you're trying to like be able to solve a very complex problem for humans, which is not an easy task whatsoever, and try to apply it to everybody. But there's just like little unique variances that happen with each person. It's, like you just said, like by and large, most of the information you could probably become an expert with, like take me from ground zero with like ChatGPT or any LLM and teach it to me like I'm a 5-year-old trying to understand nutrition and like what should my focus be? And it all points back to like these very simple things. And it's crazy that like as you have a conversation with people, how often they overlook things that they're omitting and missing out on in their day and wanting like, like, how do you break this plateau? I'm like, all right, well, let me like, an audit is a good word. I actually used that earlier today because there's this other individual in my business networking group. He does energy audits for home use. He's like, hey, we can go into a business or a home and tell you these are things that you can improve upon. And this is like your percent return on investment, right? Like you spend, call it $3,000, but it's going, your payback period is in, 12 months or 18 months or 2 years when you kind of recoup the costs because of your savings, right? And it's usually faster than that, but there's the example. And I too tell Seamus this now, like I'm an energy auditor. I'm looking at people's like output and I'm auditing whether or not like it is sufficient to help them yield weight loss, fat loss, right? And trying to pull at every possible string that's like very basic and simple. And, it's like, hey, like seemingly you're not executing on this thing and you're trying really, really hard in the training modality, but like it hasn't really netted you beyond, your threshold weight right now. You've gotten 40 pounds down, but how do you get that extra 20 to kind of really hit that goal weight, And it's crazy to kind of like say that, but like the way that you have to approach it, like that's kind of the benefit of having this kind of clinically backed practice that we get to be a part of, because, you know, our touch points there are typically not as frequent as like our one-to-one clients that are seeking us out. Because I know if I'm having these conversations with people, you know, usually weekly, and health coaching and seeing like, okay, well, what did you do well this week? And, you know, kind of audit like, you know, what they're making progress on and shedding light in a positive manner to that, versus these people that they're a little bit busy, that you see them, you maybe talk to them a few times a year, and then you see them in person once a year. Right.
Mhm.
And so like the approach that I've had in coaching that is far different. And I don't know if a lot of people get that kind of, you don't really get that kind of job training unless you're on the job, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000-hour rule is an interesting one, because in the world of fast fashion, so to speak, and easy certifications, just really people trying to achieve a certain level of status as quickly as possible without having done the prerequisite legwork, which I mean, I think it's really important that while we talk about codification and like learning and owning information, there's just a certain reality around the volume of work that you have to do. And I mean, Seamus got no qualm about it. It takes 6. Okay, is 6 a lot or not a lot? It depends on your perspective. And,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
experience. I
yeah.
love to always tell people, my wife and I get into not arguments, but she just yells at me about artificial intelligence, and I just listen, and I'm like, great thought. She goes like, health coaching is going to leave because you could check in with the AI, the Chat GPT health coach, and I'm like, yeah, people can do that. Here's the thing: there's knowledge, right? Like getting a cert in the day. Then there's
Mhm.
experience. There's actual experience, nuance, spending
Mhm.
10 years doing it, and then beyond experience is wisdom. It really is being hand in hand with a coach and going, look, I've done this 1,000 times, multiple people.
Mhm.
These are the usual routes that they go. You tell me which one works for you. And usually
Mhm.
they find one and it works. And I don't think that's where artificial intelligence is at, but that's also that's where like the new coach
Yeah.
needs to learn from. They're not there yet, right? They have the knowledge, they have the technical, the theoretical. They may have some experience, but it's like being a cheerleader still. You're not really a guide yet. And the guide, it takes, I mean, Marcus and I, 10 years now, you more, it's like, it's probably at that level where you're like, here's the wisdom, you
Mhm.
either follow it or you don't.
Yeah, I think it's just the harsh reality of the truth is it genuinely does take 5 to 7 years to find your footing, because you're just chasing other people. You're just trying to copy what they're doing. You're maybe making some random shit up and you'll realize, oh, that was a bad idea. But you don't really get the balls to like try new things and to come into your own, I think, until like years 3 to 5. And then you start tweaking and you're like, oh, that doesn't work. And you have to use the tool enough to know its limitations.
Yeah.
And that's where you're like, oh my gosh, like there's more to this. And that's where you start going into the peak in the valley of the Dunning Kruger. And you're like, ha ha, ah,
Oh,
God,
oh
it's
no,
all
shit.
bad. And I think that, you know,
Yeah.
I, I think the evolution ultimately has been for me going and chasing a level of certainty, and it's like trying to solve a problem that may not exist yet and picking your clothes out based upon the weather 7 years from now. There is no such thing as certainty, and I think that terrifies a lot of people initially, which causes them to be susceptible to spending money and marketing and everything else. But I think the more you do it, the more you're just like, I'm okay with not being certain anymore. And you're fully in control as the client. Vaya con Dios. Like, we'll see what we can do. Here's the things that will mitigate your risk of not achieving success, but they won't guarantee it. And
Yeah.
that's hard for people to swallow. That's why lab testing exists right now, which I mean, that's a whole different thing right there that, yeah, I don't want to touch that one.
Well, I mean, we could touch it. I mean,
Oh
I'm
God.
totally cool with it.
Oh,
Marcos and I
no.
don't, how do I say this? Don't, we don't back up on these conversations if we want to go there. We're totally cool with it. We're not
Oh,
held
man.
liable to anything.
All right. Well,
Are
they're all
you,
racist, but that's a different. No, I'm kidding. Well, they kind of are actually. So when you think about the populations that they study in these research pieces, like they are based upon a certain subset of populations, and
Yeah.
like that is something that when you look at a homogenized population, there are certain genetic conditions or certain genetic predispositions that will also then change the norms. And at the end of the day, that's all they really are, is just a bunch of data collections and normative values that, like, hey, if you're not this, you're not normal. Well, like we know that people's genetic expressions of certain traits and tendencies, like in epigenetics, and like, yeah, if you just eat well for the most part, like you'll solve, and exercise intensely to whatever that is for you, then you'll solve like 80% of health problems,
Yeah.
weirdly enough.
yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like part of, I think one of our physicians here, he actually said like, there are certain individuals like from a medical perspective in terms of everything that he can do, he's done kind of everything and they're exactly where they need to be from a lab value perspective, but they're
Mm,
just not losing weight, and
Mm.
he's like, who am I to, as a physician say like everything that like I can do that's like part of like my medical handbook is like, it's taken care of. They're handled. They are compliant from a medical,
Yeah.
preventative standpoint. But then, like they still come in, they have particular things that they want to do from a, subjective, like
Mhm.
what they look like. And
Mm.
I agree. I mean, like lab values, I think are
Ooh.
it's an interesting one, right? Because I feel like so many
Mhm.
people want to start there now versus
Yeah.
before. They're like, if I don't have my labs, I don't even want to get started. It's kind of like the
Marcos asked me that, like, I got my labs done like a month ago. He's like, what changes? He called me out, and I told him, I'm like, well, this year I did like 4 because every 90 days I cycle something in new
Okay.
before so that was for me. But for somebody else, Marcos is what it's saying is like,
Yeah.
sometimes they just start there, but they don't, what changes, right?
yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's really important too to consider like the homeostatic mechanisms because the body's so great at trying to regulate that. And it's by the time something shows up, something bad's happened for long enough, or something drastic has happened significantly enough to disturb that homeostatic regulatory. And like allostasis is a whole different conversation when you think about how that works. Yeah, I mean, to your point, like I think people starting there without doing the prerequisite health benefits, because it's going to tell you got to do the same thing anyway. Sleep a little bit more, drink some water, maybe have some sex in your life and chill a little bit. Like probably
Yeah.
not the worst thing.
Yeah.
It
But
was funny you say that though, because like one of the things that I feel like I've kind of struggled on is getting enough like hours of sleep. Only to
mm,
then get a study today from like Stronger by Science that said like, hey, like it's actually better just to be consistent with your sleep than
mhm,
and more important in terms of like studies that we're able to kind of cross reference here versus the actual duration. Yeah, like maybe you should try to add an extra 30-hour, kind of get into that really good range. But, I was so worried that like maybe I'm under recovered because I'm not sleeping enough, only to find
mhm,
out like, no, if I go to bed at like 9:30 and I'm up at 4:30, like that actual like consistent wake and sleep time is actually more preventative than focusing and feeling bad that I'm not getting 8. And I was
yeah,
like, great. I'm like, one less thing for me to worry about. And one more thing for me to like, hey, I can ask you subjectively, do you feel like your sleep is it better since we started working together? Yeah. All right, cool. Like now I don't really want to touch it unless they start bringing it up in conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sometimes you get these little quick synopsis from, some of those reputable places and you're like, thank God. Like I needed that. Like honestly, today I was like, that's great. Like
mhm.
I've been doing the right thing then. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, yeah, placebo, nocebo, like mimesis, everything in everything's in your head at the end of the day is what I've come to realize. Like I just finally hammered down a dissertation topic around desire engineering and how to get people to want certain things. And
Wait,
I'm in the
is your doctorate on like change psychology or like
it's in
psychology
performance psychology.
performance? Ooh, let's
Mhm.
go there. So
Yeah.
you're doing this rotation on this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've changed my dissertation topic like 4 times. At first, I was like, all right, let me do stress and let me see, like, is stress a physiological, psychological concept? And like, my dissertation interest originally was what's the bridge between the biology and psychology component of stress? I realized I couldn't monetize that and I was going to be $500,000 in debt forever. Like, I'm not doing that shit. Dumb,
Desire. What are you doing? You're
you
doing
know?
desired outcome is what you said?
Well, and so it then turned into let me go and approach these large organizations with something called organizational citizenship behavior. And
Hmm.
this was on the back end of COVID's quiet quitting epidemic everywhere. Like
Oh yeah,
people were
yeah, I
just like,
remember
I'm not
that.
going to do above and beyond my job. Well, then it became about motivation and how do we get people to do more than their job. And then we know that there's 4 levers. There's the drive, the 4 drives, if you want to look at it from the organizational. I know this will lead into desire, but there's a drive to acquire where people are looking to acquire or gain monetary, some kind of compensation or some kind of title. It's something linked to prestige and status. All right, cool. If you can pull on that lever or if it's lacking, it's one way to increase everyone's desire to do something. Right. Number
Mm.
2 is the desire to bond or the drive to bond. People want to feel connected to each other. It's one of the biggest kind of like if you think about a culture hire, some people say it's a waste of money. I'll say culture hires are probably the most underrated hiring that you can do in 2025 because they bring a certain sense of comfort and a sense of familiarity and a sense of belonging that is pretty lacking in most corporate environments where it's just like, did you do your KPI or not?
Mm.
And then we look
It
at
could be a
number.
chat GPT email like you do it or not,
Wait,
bro.
And this is like
Andrew,
when we
Andrew,
talk about that. Yeah, go
before you go
ahead.
deeper though, like a culture hire, what would someone look like that's a culture hire versus a other hire?
So, I mean, it's kind of like the whole DEI initiative, which I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of that. I don't think that DEI is the best governmental policy because we find that the best people don't end up in the right jobs. That's my position. But what I will say is that when you talk about people that may not have the most qualifications. And I'm referring mostly to like entry level positions. And we're talking about managers. The higher up in an organization you go, the more qualified you need to be. You can't be a personal hire because there are different stratagems of how to excel in certain levels. The more baseline frontliner you are, the more competent you have to be at a job skill. The higher you get up in the organizational chart and the hierarchy, the more you are actually punished for being technically adept. If you know how to do a frontliner's job better than they do, and that's where you come from. This is why a lot of managers struggle to be good managers, and why we have a managerial kind of funk right now is that you were good at your job, you got promoted, but you never learned how to become less technical and more operational. And so there actually needs to be an extraction of your technical competency if you want to be a good leader, because you have to worry about more organizational problems.
All right. I'm going to pause you there for a second because I need to hear that. I need to hear that right now because that's like, these are the things I'm working on. So that's good. So a hire or a culture hire, someone that can bring a lot of intangibles outside of just the technical
Correct.
things.
A lot of soft skills mostly.
A lot of soft skills, being able to connect and all that, and then being able to move up with communication and
Would
operation.
that also just be like their work ethic, their drive to like kind of pick up tasks that might be beneath other people that are more tenured in a sense because they don't know any better?
Well, can you ask that in a different way?
Yeah, like if you had somebody, all right, you have candidate A, candidate B, like you just said, everybody like candidate A knocks it out of the park. They have all the prerequisite qualifications, whereas like, but they interview like shit, right? But both of them got an interview, right? But the other person like may be missing like 50% of like the actual like job requisition like assets, right? But like they just killed it with like their personality, and it's like I feel like this person will be a go to bat, like I can give them a task, and they may not have the skills yet, but they will more than likely do it based on their competence. Like they feel like they could be competent at those things.
I just saw something the other day. It's like performance beats qualifications. Like I had this kind of thought in my head because like we live such in a clinical world. Like I've talked to my wife about this because she got her degree in like clinical dietetics, and like I know that's like deep and clinical, but like in my head I was like, what do I need to know? How many people do I need to have served? Or who needs to respect me for you to respect me in this component of this information? Like, because here's the thing. Do I need the qualification to change the life of people in that way? What if I just solve the problem? Like, what do I need to know? I'll do it. And like, that's how I think about things. Cause I'm like, I'd rather just learn the things. There's people that are like, just learn something. They're like polymaths. They're like quants. They're like next level. And I'm like, I'd rather just do the thing, but I don't need the 3 years of school.
Yeah, it's like showing your work back in middle school algebra. They're like, you have to list out all your steps, and you just want to jump ahead and like, here's the answer. They're like, how did you get there though? They want to see your logic, and you're like,
nah,
totally
I got there. That's all that matters.
Yeah, dude, I got penalized. I would literally lose points for that, and then it de-incentivized me in middle school to ever like want to actually diagram stuff out. And in fact, I just would get more obstinate and be like, well, I'm going to just do this for everything now. I'll take the low grade. How are you going to explain that to your boss? I'm part of the bell curve.
Like, that's the thing. It just makes so much just because it's like you have to go through this whole thing. I get it because it's a weeding out process, but it's like, let's say I do that process better than the person with the qualifications. I think is what Mark's talking about. It's like, well, who you're hiring? Person that gets the results are like, yeah, I get the right credentials, but I suck at what I do.
Well, and that in the hiring process, it's all a gamble at the end of the day. And that's where a strong central culture and the appropriate hiring process really does save you a lot of that pain. And they say, slow to hire, quick to fire. I think there's something to that because at the end of the day, you're measuring some of the intangibles that you wouldn't get. Lifetime did a really good job with this in that they used to make people do 7 interviews. So annoying to get hired as a personal trainer. But like by the time you're all the way up at like number 6 or 7, the people that don't really want to be there or don't have that innate drive to succeed and they don't really want to be there, you would argue potentially that they might not be someone that's going to have the tenacity to stick through 7 interviews. But to succinctly answer your question, Marcos, around like, do you hire the person that's 50% less qualified? No, you hire the person that can do the job. But if it's within like a little bit of a margin, at the end of the day, you want to consider what the skill set for the role is. If it's a sales role, you're going to hire for probably personality more than anything if you can then teach them the job skill. If it's something where you're looking for a data analyst, I would actually choose the person with less social skills because they probably think a little bit differently. And I think that that's really when you think about like the Clifton Strengths Finders. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's nice to know what you are, but when you move into an organizational leadership role, you're now diagramming where everyone on your team is. And if you have and we're seeing this with one of our business consulting clients right now, but they have a female dominant team. They're 98% female and it's a big team. It's like 60 people. They had one guy and the guy quit. I don't know why I didn't dig into that. I'm like, I'm just a product and program guy. I'm curious. I got questions as a consultant, but that's not my business, not my monkeys. But you look at how they deal with conflict. You look at how they now strategize, how they move the business initiatives forward. And it's frankly very different than a very male dominated type of hierarchy and organization where guys are like, we won't talk about anything, but we'll get some shit done. I promise you the shit falls apart in both instances.
Yeah.
Right. Let me not say this, but it struggles to, like, from what I've seen in this specific organization, they got very, very good social bonding, but now they're lacking a little bit of the drive that traditionally is more associated with the masculine type of personality of, like, I need to drive to succeed, to exceed, to excel, versus let me go ahead and, like, maintain this nurturing type of environment for ourselves and our clients, because they're a weight loss company. That's, they do a lot
Yeah.
of food stuff.
Is there a best split on percentage based on sex? Is it like a true 50-50 blend
Ooh,
is good, or is it like, have you looked at
no.
stuff like that?
So when we think about, we're on diversity,
Mhm.
when you have people from different backgrounds that are equally qualified, let me just say that the qualifications are probably the biggest predictor of someone being in the appropriate role. If someone's not as qualified and they're 20% less credentialed or less experienced and they haven't had that exposure, and
Yeah.
someone that is a white male, for instance, does have those things, don't hire the person that's lesser qualified. They will have a 20% performance gap potentially out of the gate. But when
Dang.
it comes to, like, male versus female, like that stuff, there really isn't an ideal split. You want to have, the whole premise of diversity is to allow different perspectives to contribute to the main and to have dissenting opinions, actually. And I think it's really important that people keep in mind that you should have people disagree with you in your life. Otherwise, you're going to stagnate. You're not going to grow. And this is what we see with politics right now. If everyone is like in these echo chambers, and these are the worst fucking things in your life because they feed you things that make you feel good, which are inherently things you agree with. And now that's all you ever get exposed to. And that's why people can't have conflict that's resolved in, like, a healthy way anymore.
Yeah, healthy conflict resolution. Dang. Okay, so
Yeah.
those are the first two. That was what was like culture.
Culture was 2. One was
There's two more in terms of that four
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
drivers
So,
of the
drive to acquire, the drive to bond, right? We need the ability to grow. And we also need the ability to feel connected, because human connection is probably the foundation of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
We see ourselves in community, and we also learn what to want inside of a community. And that's the part that people forget about, is that a lot of times people don't even know what they want. They just want what other people want, which is called mimetic desire. And that's a whole different trip. But that leads me into, like, the third drive, which it's ABCD: acquire, bond, comprehend, which is the drive to understand your craft, because people will inherently want to be competent. People really want to be good and feel like they're succeeding in what they're doing. And how we structure people, and this is where it goes back into, like, the PN methodology and, like, those things, and, like, coaching in general, is how do we set people up to feel like they're best comprehending what the task at hand is? It's by empowering them in a client-centered fashion, allowing them to pick it, because if they pick it, there's no longer this power differential of, I'm telling you what to do. Now you feel lesser than, and you inherently are going to instinctively want to rebel. It's a weird fucking power struggle.
Yeah.
And so, but this is where education comes in, and that's why we launched our education company, because we want people to feel good about being a coach, which means you need to get good at a tool, not some esoteric, conceptual, crazy textbook that you're like, great, I have a textbook now. What do I do with it? And you're like, I guess I'll just get another textbook, because we're conditioning people as an industry that more knowledge, more books, more podcasts are the thing that's going to set them apart, when in reality it's just going to talk to people.
Dude, you know what's so funny is, like, I remember back in the early days of, like, 2009, 2010, 2013 maybe, in the personal training industry, it was like you get your personal training cert, but now you get the TRX cert, you get the
Yeah.
kettlebell cert, and it's like you get all
Dude.
these certs, and it's like 99% of that
Yeah.
you just get more. You just start acquiring all these certs, and you're like, I've
For
never
what?
taught anyone these fucking movements. Like, the kettlebell cert teaches you like 100 moves, and you only use one with your clients.
Yeah. The swing.
And that one for the best bang for your buck out of all of them, to be honest. And it's like the other ones are like, you do the mace. It's like, okay, that's actually super dangerous and liable. I don't really want to teach that one. Never mind. So you start realizing, like,
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, the swing is probably just the best one.
Dude, I remember Rob Orlando. CrossFit took a lot of my money initially,
Yep.
but they had this strongman certification. And I remember I was like a buck 50 or 60 at the time. And they're like, go lift this 700-pound tire. And I was like, I can do it, guys. And I'm like, oh, this is so stupid. So stupid. I got the tire up, but I almost got my leg crushed under it. Like,
Man, I think so. A, B, C, D. C,
mhm.
comprehend.
D is
B is
defend.
defend. Defense?
Defend. Defend is more or less along the lines of maintaining the organizational values and integrity of something. And so it comes into if you've ever seen someone get treated differently, and like let's say that, someone's schmoozing it up. And this is why people hate schmoozers, actually. It's kind of interesting. In that what they're doing is they're currying social favor and building social currency. The other person that's seeing that doesn't see that. So inherently, this person's increasing their influence lever of likability. Okay, so now
Mhm.
this person's schmoozing, they're more likable. This person feels bad. Now, if they both do something wrong, like let's say that, they both miss quota. Well, the person that didn't curry social currency and they weren't socially agile, to use Brett Bartholomew's terms, they're going to be potentially like perceived and communicated with and held accountable to a different degree or in a different way than the person that's more likable. Now, is it because that person was inherently viewed as less than or something? Is it a values based thing? Or is it because the person that's more likable has made their preferences and has had more social interaction that now the person that's doing the review is actually able better to convey that feedback in a constructive format?
Can I comment on this?
Yeah.
So this is why socialization early is really important. I
100%.
remember reading Jordan Peterson's book. I think it was 12 Rules to Life, and it was on a podcast too, where he said that kids that don't socialize really early struggle
Mm,
with these things later on.
yeah.
And he noticed this in one of these kids that his friends group was with. Like the kid had a hard home situation, didn't know how to speak up for themselves or was shy, and just struggled with communication. But then the moment that the child was in an environment that allowed that, the child was like hugging the dad, hugging the mom or whatever, or hugging his wife, which is the mom of their kids. And it's like, why could this kid communicate in this endeavor, but like not in his house? And it's like, I think that communication, like if you can be empowered enough, I know that environment also plays with like this, but it's like communication, showing your boundaries, doing all those things in the workplace is like, I know right now what we're talking about is like, yeah, it may win you favors, but it's actually just laying down foundations of like boundaries, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, treating people teaching people how to treat you and I mean, at the end of the day, we're always conditioning our environment, which is why it's always an interesting conversation when it does come up of like nature versus nurture. I'm like, you condition both. You have a predisposition towards one and you can have a conscious, if you look at behaviorism, stimulus response, assertion is consciousness, like how you interact with other people. A colicky baby, if the mother gets pissy and then the baby gets more colicky, of course the baby's going to grow up less, well, I guess more a little bit disillusioned and like thinking that
Yeah.
nothing's safe. But, that's because now no one wants to be around a colicky baby, especially on a plane, you know.
It's it's funny how this like literally brought up like me being harder on my son than my daughter and my wife's comments about that. She's like,
Mhm.
like you're so hard on him. Like you're harsh. You're like the way that you're talking to him at times. And I'm just like, well, I'm like, to me, I feel like it's I don't know how else to be to him in the situation where it's like he should know better because he's 7 and she's 4. And she's like, well, that's not really an excuse. But it is because he's like, you can just see his gears turning about a decision. And it's like, hey, like, knock it out. Like, why did you decide to knock your sister upside the head? Because
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
frustrated with like how she is like trying to follow you around and like tease
Yeah.
you and deal with all these things, like trying to get a rise out of you. And, it leads to like, I'm over here defending like my position. I was like, I'm not like, I'm being tough on him, but it's like tough love in the sense of like, hey, like, knock it off. Like you're going to be in situations in life
Mhm.
where it's not going to go as expected and you
Yeah.
just can't like lash out in this situation. And even from like a work environment, like you said, likability and kind of, you know, getting maybe a little bit of preferential treatment as a result of like kind of being a yes man. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like for a few years, it was like anything and everything that my company would ask me to do. Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes, yes. You need me to travel across the country? Fuck yeah. All right, cool. Tomorrow, day's notice. Hey, babe, I'm leaving. Like,
Dude,
and
I
like,
got the hours notice. I think you got the hours notice too, right, Marcos?
oh yeah, there's been instances like that, and
That's crazy.
it was to produce more likability because I'm like, hey, like if I have an ask in the future, or if there's different things that could lead to, like you just said, kind of the ascension or the growth, and try to aspire to do more.
Yeah.
In again, like move out of operations and understand like more like how do I get to management? right? What does that look like? What does that entail? And then how do I interact with people and with that hat on versus just the operations hat? One, in the perspective of like, hey, I want to make your life easier and more
Mhm.
efficient so that you have more time, right? And I want to like solve a problem, not just for me, but also for everybody else that's like on our team, you know?
Yeah.
So I like to try to like view myself in the hat, but like, then you're bringing up this things like, or is that just you being a good, you know, operations person yourself? You know, I have like the technical skills of like how to make my day really easy, but you know, me trying to go teach this to two of our, you know, coaches that are, you know, 30 years my older, they're like, oh, like this is just easy. This just like comes natural to you. I was like, I mean, kind of. I mean, I have to like sit with it and think about like how can I affect my day flow to maximize my efficiency
Mhm.
in terms of time, especially if people show up an hour late, you know,
Mhm.
which is very common sometimes with our practice.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I don't know. Like now you got me thinking about a whole bunch of other like things and like an
I kind of
organization, how I'm
relate.
doing stuff right now. But the Seamus and I have talked a lot about like, you know, psychology, coaching philosophy and things that we're, you know, we've noticed this big transition in terms of like how people were approaching things like during COVID and like on the end of COVID and then into like kind of 2025 where it's like, you
Mhm.
know, you're dealing with, like you just said, like you identified like, oh, we're currently in a recession, right? And so like, you know, how people are going to spend their money to help
Mhm.
optimize things like,
Mhm.
you know, I'm over here like, yeah, like imagine if people like don't not invest in themselves. Like they need to do that because they're going to feel as though like, hey, $200 to spend per month for this coach is going to give me, you know, as much time as I need to vent and deal with other problems in addition to help me stay focused on that number one goal of why I hired them, like the nutrition expertise, right? You know, like I feel like it's evolved for both of us since, you know, doing these courses. And hell, like
Mhm.
one of the courses I did, I spent it's like the one I actually paid the most out of pocket for. I used the least. The one it's
What
funny.
was it?
It was an IHP certification for like specialty labs and health, like holistic diagnostics. It's a very niche thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't even advertise it, like, you know, but I was interested in like trying to be like, am I missing something here from my coaching perspective? Like, should I start with some of these tests? Is it really a stool thing? And, you know, I'm like, you know, I've yet to like have to pull it out of my toolkit. It is there. And I bring it up to people and I say, hey, like, if you want to investigate further, like, here's the cost with it. And they're like, okay, well, you said that I had to do an elimination diet anyway. So can we just start with that? I was like, yeah, like, you know, so like all $4,000, $5,000 spent to say like, hey, like this is the solution, or we can go spend a couple $100 so that you can know definitively like, hey, like maybe you do need to add in XYZ supplement into routine in addition to elimination, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very similar thing where, but when I was going in my diagnostic kind of rabbit hole, which it seems like, and I think I was chasing significance because I wanted to be able to solve better problems, or like I thought it would somehow put me in a deeper level of esteem. So at the end of the day, it was like at the beginning of it, I guess I should say it was more of an ego play for me.
Mhm.
And it put me wildly outside my scope of practice. Let's just say that. But it
Yeah.
was the FDN course, and it was like $8,000 or something. And they go into
With
like
John Reed.
Reed Johnson, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Reed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was like the first ever, because I was like heavily into like the TSAC, NSCA, CrossFit, like performance only. And I was like, well, I probably should learn something about this stuff, right? My
Mhm.
coach at the time, Michael Band, he was like big into that. And everyone that I know that's done that for a while is just like, dude, I don't, after about 5, 6 years, like I don't use that shit at all. Cause like you're exactly hitting the nail on the head. And again, the upstream causative and contributors to why someone might have pathology are largely going to be behavioral. Not to take away from people that do really do have some like genetic, like the BRCA genes and like breast cancer and like stuff like that. Obviously, please, like we're not saying don't go get testing, or at least I'm not. I'm saying that by and large, do the things that you should be doing to be a healthy human before you go down and investing tens of thousands of dollars. Because lab testing gets like $8,000, $9,000, and then the interventions and like all the other stuff on the back end of that. Like it's just cost prohibitive to be told that we're gonna have to do this again in a couple months to retest.
Yeah.
And at the same time, because that's what people always forget about is you test it. Okay, well, cool. You need to measure
Did you
change.
fix it? Right.
Exactly.
You know, are you in a better standing, you know, 3, 6 months
Yeah.
out? Yeah.
Mhm.
This is the interesting
Yeah.
thing, though. This is probably like the psychology, the marketplace, though, is everyone and their mom is doing this now. Like
100%. You
everyone and
can
their
you
mom.
cannot not do it because of that.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's like
Or
the
offer
talk
it.
of the town. It's like that affluent marketing. Everyone, oh yeah, I'm doing my labs. I'm with this company. I do it every
Yeah.
few months. Cool. Yeah, I'm on these supplements. I do these peptides, and it's like everyone's the narrative is shifting to where health is becoming this thing. But is it an overdoing of health in terms of at least the quantifying
Yes.
of it? Because like, yeah, you could do annual labs and I think you'd be okay, right? But then there's people that are like, I want to do it more often. I want to do this stuff. I want to do that. And it's like
Mhm.
a course correction. It's like, I think it will. I think it will. I think there's certain companies that there will be responsibility, but also at the same time, it's like, yo, this always talks, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's always the nature of the incentives, which is why the ABCD model is so prevalent. And that's like, how you reward people or how you disincentivize them to adopt a certain behavior set is really the only thing that matters. And this is why when there's money, which is associated with so many different potential benefits like freedom, power, status, prestige, love, like even in our dating, and this actually is really interesting because it ties in with the mimetic desire thing. By the way, like wonderful book, Luke Burgess. I think it's like Wanting the Power of Mimetic Desire. If I could just give everyone one thing, it's to wake up from the matrix a little bit and to understand that what you want is maybe not
On the
what you
Audible.
want.
It's on the Audible right now.
Yeah, dude,
Hold
it's so
on.
good. It's so good. Like
I feel
it'll
like I've
mess you up.
struggled.
Blue
Wanting
cover, yellow text. Wanting the Power of Mimetic Desire
Luke
and
Purpose.
Burgis, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect. All right, it's on there.
And the expectation effect, another really good one because we're predictive machines.
Mhm.
Our sensory present and it is just a combination. Like we're always predicting what's going to happen based upon what we feel right now. And what we
Mhm.
feel is then grounded in we remember that feeling being associated with in the past. So sensory present, remembered past are the two things that change what you predict. So the more you experience something, this is why driving to and from somewhere, you wake up there sometimes. You're like, wait, what happened? Because
Mm.
it's nothing new and novel. And so this is why novelty and new experiences cause time to slow down and monotony causes time to speed up, which is why one of the worst things you can do as a coach is be a directive coach because you become monotonous to the person. You become a noxious stimulus that then gets ignored in the background. So
Can you say that one more time? Holy cow. Like
I blacked
I
out.
feel like we need to
I don't know what I said.
He's like, not at
to
all.
run
No
that
way.
back. So as a coach, you need to slow it down because you just become something in the background. Like you just if
Mm,
you're just directing people, they're just like, whatever. This
yeah, I
guy's just
mean,
showing me what to do.
you become the source of truth or the source of like, and this is where it becomes for particularly emotionally vulnerable people. They tend to get sucked into this like way of you have to tell them what to do. You never want to be in that condition because that's where you create autonomy and those autonomous like, or you create a lack of autonomy and then you create a dependency. And dependency is one of the worst things for the consumer at the end of the day. And it's actually fairly unethical to get people to need you for everything all the time. Your goal should be to teach them a skill.
Hey, but like the healthcare model don't like that though, Andrew. You know, I need my
I don't.
subscription,
You
recurring. I need to
do.
have my change behavioral
Yeah.
therapist that like I need to
Yeah.
see her every week because,
God.
I need them. I'm broken. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole therapist health paradigm is frankly the worst one because you look at the number of obese, overweight, sad, depressed individuals, and oftentimes they're in the mental health field because they just sit there and just empathize and listen to people all day.
Dude, this is it right here. I had to have a call with this. I was on a podcast and it's like you have ethical compassion, you have empathy, but you just
Yeah.
don't feed into the bullshit. Like I think Marcos does a really good job of not feeding into the bullshit.
He seems pretty stoic. Like you seem like you do a really good job of keeping like the main thing, Mark. You're the wayfinder in this situation, huh?
I mean,
Don't disappoint me, Marcos. Wayfinder meaning like you're a little more linear. I get that Seamus might be a little more non-linear, and you seem like a little more linear about communicating. You're really
yeah, I
good at
mean,
making the main point.
yeah, well, that's the logic background. I mean, my
Mm,
degree is like upper level mathematics and,
mhm.
logic and orientation and like if then, like
Yeah.
it's consequential, right? Like, and everything kind of has
Mm,
that. And a lot of times I struggle when other people coach me and they say like, you're like, it's a but statement. It's not why can't it be a both? Why can't it be an and? And I was like, because in this situation to me, it feels like it's a but, you know? But yes, I
Mhm.
am definitely more of like, best way to get something done is a straight line. Right. But, ultimately, as I paint that picture for individuals, is like, hey, like, I think it helps me knowing that that's my bias is like, hey, like, if someone came
mm,
to me and if I'm going to sell them on a 3-month program with me, right? I'm like, hey, if you do everything as directed and you show up to these calls and you listen and we apply, I guarantee you 10% of body weight can come off in 12 weeks.
mhm.
Right. And one of my most recent clients, he knocked it out of the park. Right. And he's like, I'm at 9.8% body weight lost. He's like, you called it. And I was like, yeah, like, but that doesn't work for everybody, obviously. Right. And there were still peaks and valleys and there was plateaus amidst that. And, he came with good questions. And amidst all that, knowing that like, hey, like this is a linear path to like this one outcome, I still have to have, I was still constantly probing him about like, yes, I know you can get it done faster, but what about a year from now? So now I'm trying to paint this picture of like, where do you see yourself long term with this? Because you
Mhm.
came to me because you've done that quick fix many a times before and it's never stuck. Whereas now when he comes on the calls and we're slowly like, I'm slowly not becoming a need for him, right? It was like once a week call into every other week, and then it'll probably turn to once a month, and then he's maybe fades off into the abyss, and hopefully it just all sticks, right? And he
Mhm.
comes back for just a consult and like, hey, like I've been flubbing a little bit, like what do I need to do? And I'm gonna be like, back to what you said about the novelty aspect. I've actually identified that people that do come back, and I give them almost like I've given the same thing in the past. Like, hey, like it's the same, like it was a spreadsheet and like you're going to track it here and do this again. And in my head, I'm like, they probably don't want to fucking do that again because it doesn't have that sense of like something kind of new and shiny.
Mhm.
So I was like, hey, like while the spreadsheet's the same and that's where data's getting collected, how I want you to focus on these things now. I want you to view it on, your rolling weekly average or your monthly average or these new viewpoints and like open up the perspective. So yeah, while I'm a wayfinder, I do definitely try to find ways to not bias that, right? Which is a
Mhm.
really hard thing for me as in my like coaching practice, right? And I think ultimately too, like, knowing your biases and identifying like what you can do well, what's in your scope and, when to, cut off a relationship with certain people could be helpful. But I'm also finding too, certain people are getting a lot of other benefit when I'm not coaching them in that linear path either, which is fucking
Mhm.
hard for me. Cause I'm like, am
Mhm.
I even doing anything positive for these people?
It's called
It's
flux, dude. It's the weirdest thing. Just being in flux and being comfortable with like, we don't know where we're at. That's okay. You know? And like
Yeah.
we're just in a flux zone right now. And it's like that's the weirdest thing with people because it's not so linear.
Mhm.
And just being comfortable with like, yeah, it's I don't know. And that's okay. And and it just works out somehow and always does. But Andrew, I wanted to ask,
Mhm.
because we've been here for an hour too, but like let's
Oh,
talk
wow.
about this mimetic desire
Wow.
thing too. I want to
Crazy.
talk about this thing that you're doing, doctor, obviously without
Oh, yeah.
overdoing it, because I know you have to defend it. Hopefully, someday people do their doctorates and they can go on offense with it instead of trying to just defend all the time. You just knock some people out. But that's my
I
little
mean,
defense joke.
yeah.
But let's talk about desire. Like, so this desire thing, where does that come into play with all this, man?
So, organizational citizenship behavior, ABCD, that would have been like a corporate version of not something that was super interesting to me. So moving out of that, I was like, well, there's just something here. And the entire reason why I got my master's was because I thought writing the best plan, my master's in human performance.
Yeah.
I thought writing the best plan would be like, why would you not as an athlete just do the plan? And naturally, like I usually keep one on my desk somewhere as a prop, but it was like a 400-page document, injury analysis, nutrition needs, 6 months of periodization, workouts, like, all this whole thing. None of the athletes ever read it. So I got pissed. And so I was like,
What, you
well,
want
why?
an athlete to read 400 pages?
Oh my
Shit,
God,
no
dude.
way.
One read it about halfway through. The one that read it got into a car accident. Motherfucker. So they couldn't do that. Man, I was so frustrated. And then like
And
I
this is
used
the
to be
thing, like education leads to adherence, but it's like the form of education, probably.
I mean, honestly, I feel like my master's degree, shout out to Mike Martino. He was a great dissertation or a thesis chair and everything. But I feel like I learned how to Google a lot of shit. That's really how I learned. And in my doctorate, I'm learning how to think through things. And like I think it's a really uncomfortable place to be. And anyone that's learning anything new, it's always really uncomfortable to have to go through that friction point because friction is the only way you gain traction, literally in a physics perspective, if you don't have
Yeah.
anything to push on. But friction's uncomfortable, which is why most people go nowhere. And so when we think
Got to do
about,
the unscalable, man. Just got to do the thing that's like super
yeah,
difficult.
yeah, 100%. And this is why, like, you think about a function of scale, the better you get at helping other people scale, the better of a leader you're likely to be. The worse you get at scaling because something has to be really high quality, the worse of a leader you're likely to be because you're going to be a micromanager control freak. And so all these things point to this idea that people crave significance. And there's like a lot of different, evolutionary drives as to why people want things. Status, they want to be able to acquire a mate, they want to be able to retain a mate. And so conceptualizing all these things, we know that desire, if we just adopt a universal definition of any kind of psychological energy directed at acquiring something, that would be how we would define desire. How do we get people to desire to do the things that they're inherently supposed to do when everyone else is ripping their attention away when one half a second scroll because you didn't get the hook right? And so this is why, and it's really commoditized. And I frankly, like I waffle about this all the time because if I want people to watch the content, which is supposed to be anti-brain rot content, I have to put it in a brain rot format. I fucking hate it. It's like one of the biggest turnoffs to me about social media. And I delete my social media every day, and then I'll re-download it, post, and I'll delete it again because I find myself habitually opening it, and desire can be conditioned unconsciously. That's the problem right now, that everyone's consuming so much stuff and they have no idea what they're consuming because they've never been taught how to defend against it the same way
Dude.
that AI is a whole thing.
Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy. My brother and I had a conversation about this where he's saying, if you found something that you like, just don't go to the comments, bro. Just don't. Because if you find, and I see myself doing that, I'm like, yep, if I see something, even if it's controversial, even if it's good or bad, just don't go to the comments, because now you're like 30 comments deep, like, and like, what are other people thinking about this? And it's like, can you just think about this thing yourself instead of having other people's thoughts on it? Just think critically on your own,
100%. 100%.
You describe my qualms with social media and my relationship with it to a T. With that, like, you have to convey a message in a brain rot content form, and we're so kind of against that because there's just fucking nuance, and but I do think that there's a place for that. I feel like, and maybe this is just like us in the education sense, like we're seeking out those people that are like, yes, they did a good job of the hook, but then like the actual material is what you just described, is like very valuable, very concise, to the point. But yeah, it's tough. And the thing was, though, like, business was better when I was making the brain rot content or trying to figure out how to do it, even though it may have just been to catch the attention, because ultimately those people probably come in with like problems you've heard before, and you're like, hey, it's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay that you're like willing to learn this. And, are you really, are you willing to give yourself like 90 days or 3 months just to like, learn how to be, pretty, what's the word? Pretty, not a master, but like adept, right? Like you have a good hand in these things. And I feel like nutrition for us is really that way. It's like yesterday I had my consult with like a new client, and 26-year-old, female, and I'm like, call our, producer, / my assistant after I finished. I was like, are my consoles too long? Am I going too in depth with shit? Like what's the right amount? Do I just tell her, hey, this week 1, go eat protein, figure it out, put it in a tracker, boom, that's it. Like one action item, 20 minutes. Is that enough value? Or was it better for me to do an hour, 10-minute consult with somebody, like diving into the details of like all the things that like, are likely to show up and come, but like, and then distill it back down to like, hey, this is still week 1. Go get the protein in. All right, let's track the food, take photos. Like, let's just like, this is going to be a little uncomfortable, but it's going to be a learning curve. You're going to be fine. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and there's something to be said around the delivery of that, because at the end of the day, the work is the work, and we can all agree on that. Like, you're going to have to be in a deficit. You're going to have to manage your protein. You're going to have to consume fiber, drink water, sleep, exercise. Okay, that's all trite. But when we think about how we package that, I think that, and I can't remember, I think it's not Maxwell. There's a guy, it's Leadership IQ. He has a communication style quiz that I think is really valuable. It's 12 questions long, take you 2 seconds. And it breaks it up into quadrants. And that's why I say linear versus nonlinear, and then emotional versus non-emotional. And so for people that think, and you strike me as someone we would consider a functional communicator, where you're very much process oriented, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if someone presents that to you, they're going to be more well received than someone that's more intuitive, which is a bottom liner. Don't tell me the details. I'll figure it out on my own. I need to be in a deficit. Okay, cool. That's all I need. I'm going to go out. And so when you start to canvas across these different communication styles, it'll change how you disseminate that plan. And if it's a 23-year-old, frankly, they might be, so there's 4 different kinds, just to give you the high notes of analytical, which is someone that tends to be, I think they're non-emotional and they're very linear, right? And then you go to the right, and we're going top left, top right is intuitive. They're emotional. They're not necessarily, they're kind of like the opposite. The bottom liner, they need to know what it is. They don't want to know the details. They want to figure it out. And then you go down to the bottom right, you have a personal communicator who is basically non-linear and, emotional. So they're all over the place. They love it for the love of the game. Those are the people that'll make you feel warm and fuzzy about yourself. And the entire coaching conversation will be around you as the coach. They're like, how's your life? How's this going? And like, we all know the type, because they don't want to talk about themselves. That's just their communication style, which is grounded in a certain drive, and they have a strong drive to bond. And so now we can start to look at that. We're like, all right, that's an interesting lever.
I feel like these should be in our questionnaire, Marcos, when we intake clients? Like, how do you
If only we had a certification that teaches how to do that.
Oh shit.
Shameless plug where he's like, hey, we have something built for you.
But like my point, and that's why we charge $77 a month, because it is like, when we think about, and this was a weird subsect of benefit that happened when I launched the initial version of this that was drastically like underpowered at NCI, is that it was a mindset course. It was mostly a communication course. And the amount of relationships and marriages that it saved was like, I was like, what? It's because we taught people how to like be empathetic and how to actually be emotionally intelligent, how to communicate, how to understand other people's communication styles, how to perspective take, and then how to navigate like the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. Because if your spouse isn't thinking about it and you force them into an action phase and they're in pre-contemplation, they haven't had time to digest and allow that stuff to inherently, organically see the value in that. We're jumping over problem awareness. We're going straight into product awareness. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, no wonder there's gonna be friction, because they weren't even expecting a problem. You just put them in a car accident of an ultimatum,
Yeah.
Damn. And so it's like
You
all
described
these
my
things.
problem with my wife to a T, Andrew.
I
You
guess
should
he
be a
needs
marriage
more,
therapist.
Andrew.
You can go spend $800 at NCI, or you can give us $67 and we'll figure it out. But long story short, like there really is, and it's something that we have so much interaction with, but we don't realize it because it's never something that people conceptually pull out of the air and say, this is what communication is. This is how other people communicate. If you ever feel friction, it's probably just a communication breakdown. And Brett Bartholomew goes into a lot of the stuff. If you want an experiential workshop, he has something called I think it's called the apprenticeship. And it was a weird experience when I first went through it, because everyone was from a different walk of life, but the course was grounded in like communication strategies. And while we don't use those strategies, there's a fair amount of overlap in our research. But I think that it was a really valuable experience to actually role play, because that's a large portion of the course, is like you go in there, you have these challenging conversations where you get to like work through stuff.
Yeah. No, I love this stuff, and Marcos and I are big fans of
Yeah, Brett.
Oh, okay,
Brett we did the course during COVID with Brett, and he came. I mean, talk about I don't know what it was at the time, because it was 5 years ago at this point.
4 or 5 years ago. It was just for us.
It was our health coaches. He was, I'm telling you, you bringing up Brett is just bringing back the flashbacks. Like, I've never seen someone command a Zoom room as well as he does. So I could only imagine what an in-person version of that actually looks like. And then, it's like, yeah, like you're just.
It was crazy, man. I met Brett like 10 years ago, Marcos. And this is when his book Conscious Coaching came out.
Oh, man.
He's at this Speed, Strength, and Performance Summit. Me and my buddy are going there for exercise science CEUs, for personal training or whatever. And his book is there. And both my friend and I were like, we've never seen anyone like talk in a room like this before. Never. And I've been a big fan since. And we bought his book on the spot. We're like at a bar. We're like, here, we'll give you the cash. Venmo to bought the book, met his wife, and then all this stuff. My light's turning off here. But he's great. And then he came in. I've met him at a few more courses after that and a few more times, but I did his Art of Coaching course, and that definitely was good. Not to take away from your course, because I want to make sure we're advertising the right course here.
Yeah.
We're not
But James, I feel like the way that he's talking about how it's taking in so many other people's ideas as well and putting that in consideration shows the breadth of what the value it brings, even though it may not be as expensive as some of those other ones. So you're like, again, being able to articulate that, I think it drives a lot of value. And I mean, obviously you priced it accordingly based on what you think is a need in the space. And I appreciate that, because I do feel that kind of burden where it's like, for a while I thought like, I'm going to get my education and I'm done. Only to find out like, you got to keep fucking learning. So it's like,
that with no top, dude.
Yeah. No one teaches you that, dude.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's
Marcos, you got any last questions for Andrew? Maybe we'll shut it down here, just because we're taking up a lot of his time today. So I want to make sure we're respectful of that.
It's a note of your work day. I appreciate you guys kicking it for this long.
We start early, actually. We are on East Coast time, even though we work on the West Coast. No, I mean, I feel like you did a good job of explaining a whole bunch of different avenues here. I love the ABCD thing, like you said, the more corporate version in a sense, but I love how there's probably so much more to like gain from this in the sense of like being a part of your guys' community. And I'm assuming, like, what's the model look like? Is it more of like kind of community focused and led, or is it more of a one-to-one thing? Like little particulars look like in terms of like the subscription?
As far as the way it works, we have a school community. And so we actually have two different tiers, one of which is like the $67 a month or whatever. And that includes the content. It doesn't include the certification track, but you can watch all the certification modules. If you want to actually pursue and get the certificate, then that's $97 a month, and it's access to all our courses as they
Yeah.
come out, as they get updated. So right now we have probably a good 20 hours of content in there, and the coaching psychology certification is getting uploaded as we write it out. The nutrition one's already up there. The clinical collaboration one's our next one. So if you are a listener and you are like a physician of any sort, if you are an allied health professional, we are looking for people that are in those veins to come in and basically help personal trainers, nutrition coaches, health coaches understand where their scope of practice ends, where it overlaps, and how to really work with that population, because we think that preventative care is definitely underutilized. Personal trainers, nutrition coaches, health coaches have the most time and touch points, but they may not have the ability to go out and do lab testing. I don't know why you'd ever need to, but and so how do we keep the people in those respected lanes, and how do we really expedite a lot of that client experience? And that's why we're looking for those chiropractors, physical therapists, nursing practitioners, internists, physiatrists, anyone that is an endocrinologist, to help really navigate some of those transition points and when and where to build that network. Because we do think that the future of coaching is going to be back to local communities. It's going to be a quasi hybrid model. And we understand that, exactly what you said earlier, people want the in-person stuff. But the problem is that they don't have access to maybe some of the dialogue or the conversations or the communication skills or the basic nutrition or fitness protocols that you would have to do anyway. And so that's why we did a lot of the basic stuff inside of our certs to make that available, so that way people can have those meaningful conversations with the people that are medical providers, and kind of elevate that status. But yeah, anyways, all the certs, community, live Q&A calls, hot seats. I'm sure there's like a laundry list of other things that are in there too. My business partner is usually the one that has all that stuff lined up.
What's the community called again, Andrew? Sorry, just
It's Empowered University.
Empowered University. Perfect. So empowereduniversity.com.
Yes.
Perfect. We'll get that on the show notes. But yeah, man, we'll close it out here. Andrew, no, seriously, thank you for your time. For the folks listening, obviously, man, this is a great conversation around like change behavior psychology, desire, things like this, but also in the context of 3 health coaches talking about this and being in the fitness nutrition world. I think it's just super deep.
Yep.
So you guys get that. But please give Andrew some love. Like, subscribe, and follow for us as well. We are rising up in the Apple ecosphere. So if you guys can give us some love there as well and share. And if you found this episode useful for someone in the professional space like this, and they want to get connected with Andrew and they want to help out with these certifications and qualifications, and they're more in that preventative care lane, come on in. I think they need your help. So appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Absolute treat. Till next time.
Thanks, man.
I'll
Appreciate
talk
it.
more about desire.
Desire. Let's go.
Desire.